Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jordan and today I'm going to be doing a video that is super late that I intended to do much earlier in the month, but did not get around to doing because your girl's been busy, but hopefully you'll enjoy it regardless. Today I'm going to be ranking all of my 2018 reads from worst to best. I have done reviews for quite a few of these already, so you'll probably have a bit of a sense of where some of these are going to fall, but I figure this might be a fun and enjoyable vid regardless, so let's just dive right into it. The first book that I'm going to talk about, the worst book of the year, and I called it in like March or May or whenever I read and reviewed this book. It was early, but the worst book that I read in 2018, without a doubt, is 36 Questions That Changed My Mind About You. There are a lot of bad books that I read this year, but this one just has a special place kind of above all the other ones, and it's just sheer incompetence as far as storytelling, character development, interesting plot, the actual writing in it. It was all just so poorly executed. Now I have a full review on this book on my channel, so I will link that down below and in the cards. But yeah, it was just shockingly bad. So the book follows Hildy and Paul as they complete the kind of viral 36 questions that are supposed to make you fall in love. It is marketed as a young adult book, but I would say it's even more middle grade, and basically it's just their love story. The second worst book that I read this year was unfortunately Zenith the Androma Saga by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. This was another one of those books where I just didn't feel like it had enough grasp on just basic story structure and character development and just story development. Like it didn't make enough sense for it to really be a novel. That's what those two books have in common, and also why they are the worst two books of the year. And the glaring problems in both of them made it seem like it needed several more stages of development and editing for it to really be sold as a product, which is why this book and the previous one are the worst two of the year. This book follows 6 characters, but the protagonist really is Androma Ricella, and it's a sort of political heist book, kind of. It's really all over the place, so it's hard for me to quantify, but it follows a space pirate crew who is tasked to bust someone out of jail and get them home safely, basically. I have a horrifically long review on this book as well, which I will link down below and in the cards, so you can check that out if you're interested. I mean, who are we kidding though? That's how all of you found me, so yeah, probably already seen it. The next book on my list, the third worst of the year, was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now this book was definitely not as structurally broken as the two that came before it, but as far as story goes, I felt that the characters were really poorly developed. There was a lot of gaping plot holes, the characters themselves were not enjoyable to read, and the writing was super weird, flowery, but not in a good way. It just didn't make sense. So there was a lot of problems that I had with this book on top of the actual kind of problematic issues I had with the story and the messages and themes. So that's why this book is the third worst book that I read this year. And I also have a review on this. I will also link that down below in the cards so you can check that out if you're interested. I kind of knew going in that I likely wasn't going to enjoy it because I had read Throne of Glass and I also did not enjoy that. But this one, weirdly, I felt like was even worse. Throne of Glass was just very generic in a lot of ways, but this one I actually had real issues with, so it's a bit of a mess, but let's just carry on. The next one on my list is a recent read, and I'm gonna talk about it as well as 2 others all at once, but this is the order we're gonna put them in. Fourth worst read this year was Siegen Storm by Leigh Bardugo, followed by the 5th worst book, Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, followed by the 6th worst book, Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. So this is kind of the order that we're going in from worst to best. I have reviews up on these two. I'm going to be filming a review on this one. I read these for the Gush-along-a-thon, which if you guys missed it, I was fortunate enough to be on the live show for the Gush-along-a-thon with Kat from Paperback Dreams and Cindy from Roots with Cindy, and I will link that below as well as the 2 reviews, which it was a lot of fun. And I'm now reading the Six of Crows duology. I just finished Six of Crows. It was actually really good. I really enjoyed it, so we will likely be doing a Six of Crows duology live stream as well, so stay tuned for that. I'll give you all the info if that happens and let you know. But yes, let's talk about the books. Siegen Storm was to me the worst of the trilogy by far, just because it felt like filler. It didn't feel like it served much of a purpose, and the pacing of this book was a mess. It was way too fast at the beginning and way too slow for the rest of the book. It didn't feel like it served enough story purpose in the scope of the trilogy, and the characters I were not a fan of for the most part. Shadow and Bone was a little bit better. It was just mostly generic, and as far as the protagonist, I really didn't like her. There was a lot of side characters that I felt were underdeveloped, and overall it just didn't feel like it was giving me enough as far as interesting story or as far as interesting characters, so that's why it comes next. My favorite of the 3 was Ruin and Rising. I felt like the characters had developed to a point where they were a lot more likable in this book. I thought that the climax of the trilogy, not necessarily the climax of the book, but the climax of the trilogy just was a lot more exciting as far as the plot things that were going on. And yeah, there was quite a few characters in this one that I actually cared about, so that was nice. That being said, I still didn't like it that much, and I would not recommend this trilogy to anyone. But now we're kind of getting into the territory of books that I thought were just okay. This next book definitely falls into that category of it's fine, it's not terrible, it's not great, it's okay. And that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I have a short review of this book on my channel. Basically, I kind of just say, it's fine, there was good things about it, there was bad things about it. I liked one of the protagonists because there are 2. I honestly don't even remember that much about this book. It follows Kel and Lila. Kel is a magic user from Red London, and Lila is a non-magic user from Grey London. Basically, there are a bunch of parallel universes that sit on top of each other. There's Red London, Grey London, Black London, and White London, and Kel is one of the only people who can go from parallel London to other parallel London, and so the story is kind of about Kel and Lila, and they're trying to fix a problem that Kel created because he's dumb. I liked the writing style of it, and I liked a lot of the world building elements of it. There was a lot of characters that I felt very mediocre about. Kel was fine, Lila was very annoying to me. Overall, it was okay. It didn't really leave me with much. I didn't really feel a ton, but it was fine. The next book is also fine. I read this very early on in the year, and that is Bone Gap by Laura Ruby. I have not filmed a review on this book, nor will I, simply because I don't have enough to say about it. It is a magic realism book set in I don't think it's the prairies, it's just middle of nowhere United States. I did like some of the magic realism elements of it, and the main character was interesting-ish, but I didn't feel like there was enough plot elements or character elements that were really keeping me engaged. It was just a bit of a slow read. And again, while it wasn't bad, it also wasn't great. It didn't really leave me with much, though I will say if you liked The Night Circus, I do think you would like this book, because it kind of feels tonally very similar. So take that with a grain of salt. I didn't particularly love The Night Circus. It kind of left me feeling fine, but not like super excited or engaged as well. And I feel like these two are kind of, they had a similar feel to them, which is why I think if you liked The Night Circus, this is something that you would enjoy. The main character of this is Finn, and Rosa, a girl that he very much likes, has gone missing from their town, and I don't really have, I can't really speak too much about it because I feel like it will give a lot away, so I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, it wasn't for me, but I don't think it's not for everyone. I think there are a lot of people that would enjoy this book. The next one on my list I kind of enjoyed, but I, again, was kind of disappointed by it, and I've just kind of decided that this author maybe isn't for me, and that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This book has a lot of praise and a lot of hype, and I went into it really excited despite not adoring A Darker Shade of Magic. But again, I just felt a little bit disappointed. I did enjoy the characters in this definitely more than the characters in A Darker Shade of Magic. I thought that the kind of atmosphere of this book was really compelling because it is a bit of an anti-hero story, and I did think that there were a lot of interesting elements as far as character and development and, again, world building. But overall, it just didn't connect with me. And unfortunately, I think that is just the way that V.E. Schwab writes. I, for some reason, can't connect with her characters. It feels almost too omniscient, and I can't really get into the heads of the characters and into the meat of them, so I unfortunately don't think I will be picking up any more V.E. Schwab books, despite her writing kind of being objectively good. Like, there are so many good elements to both of her books. I think that a lot of people would really enjoy them, but for some reason I just couldn't connect with them, and that's fine. So this next one on my list I enjoyed quite a bit. I didn't love it, but I did really like it, and that is The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This book also kind of has an anti-hero lead. He's a thief, and he basically gets tasked to steal a sacred object, and I'm not going to go too far into it because, again, spoilers, but he basically gets tasked to steal something. I really enjoyed the world of this book because it is kind of based off of Greek and Roman mythology, which I love. So that was really nice, as well as the characters. I feel like they had a lot of development. Originally, when I first picked it up, I was like, oh no, I really don't like Jen, because I just couldn't relate to him or connect with him, and over the course of the book, I think that really improved, and I really started to love him, which was awesome. And I think that there are a lot of really great characters in this book that you can really latch onto. And I'm really excited to continue on and read the rest of the series because I hear it gets even more into the politics and the world, which I really enjoyed. So it was good. It was really good. I would recommend. The next one on my list is a book that I read, and originally I really liked it, but after some time and space away from it, I liked it a little bit less. Overall, I did still really enjoy it though, and that is The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. This book is a new adult/adult fantasy novel that is set in the world of Thesson, which is loosely based off of ancient Greece. And basically it follows Tobias, who enters the Sovereign's Tournament, which is basically a dangerous tournament put on by the king, the sovereign, who is trying to find a mate, a man, a husband for his daughter. And Tobias enters this tournament because he has to use the entry fee to support his family. I, again, think that there are a lot of things that I kind of realized after reading the book that I didn't particularly care for, and you can find that a lot of that anyways in my review of the book on my channel, which I will again link, cards, you know the deal. But yeah, there are still a lot of things that I really enjoyed, and while reading it I flew through it. I thought that it was so fast-paced and exciting, so there was a lot that just gave me a great feeling while reading it, even though I can see a lot of faults in the actual story and the writing and the structure. Like, it's just one of those reads that while I was reading it felt so exciting to me, which was really refreshing because I had kind of been going through a stint of books that were not so good that I did not enjoy. So reading this, I really liked it at the time, and that's why it's so high on my list, because it just gave me a good feeling on the inside, okay? The next book is a reread, and that is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, I have something kind of horrible to admit. I have not, I don't think, read all of the Harry Potter books. I was really young, and I've read some of them, most of them, but again, I was really young, and I don't really remember all of the details, because I kind of have a goldfish memory. Like, I can reread the same books over and over, like, every freaking year, which I've done for some books, and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened, like, I completely forget. So I don't actually know how many I read. I don't think I read all of them, but I'm rereading them now, and I'm really enjoying them. I've reread the first 3 books in the series, and The Chamber of Secrets is my least favorite of those 3, but I still have really enjoyed it. The characters and the world is just so well crafted, and just so enjoyable to read, and her writing style is so simple but just really beautiful and elegant. So Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, would recommend, really enjoyed. Moving on, let's go. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is another reread that I did this year. I had read it in 2017 around Christmas, and then I picked it up at the beginning of the year again because Iron Sun, I think that's what it's called, the new one came out. I still haven't read that one yet because I lent Morning Star to my brother, and he has taken forever and is still reading that book despite liking the first two, and he's the worst. But he's picking his way through Morning Star, which I would like to reread before I read the next series, the kind of spin-off that Pierce Brown is currently writing. So I've reread Red Rising and Golden Sun this year, and I adore these books. Red Rising is definitely not as good as Golden Sun in my opinion. I do have a review of Red Rising as well on this channel. There are faults. The pacing of it is a little and there are some issues that I have with the book, but overall the characters in this world are just so rich. Pierce Brown is a master of writing characters. I think the protagonist is not necessarily the most interesting, but the side characters that he develops are just absolutely fascinating and rich and so fleshed out and full, and really he takes advantage of them in the story, which I appreciate so much. So I really enjoyed this book. I think that the action in it is really exciting. It's really, if you enjoy playing like war games or strategy games, I think you'd enjoy this book because it has a lot of that strategy elements. Like, it feels like you're playing like Age of Mythology or like Empire's Dawn in the Modern World or Rome or something like that. Like one of those strategy war games on your PC that I played a lot as a child. That's the kind of feel that this book has for a lot of it, which I adore. So yes, really love this book. So this book follows Darrow, who is a miner on the planet Mars, and basically after a tragic event, he is thrust into a world that is much bigger than he could have ever imagined, and he basically wants vengeance for this horrible thing that happened to him. And so yeah, the whole series is kind of about him getting vengeance and also finding his place in the world, which I think is really interesting. There's so many interesting elements of politics that I really enjoyed in this book. Yeah, I loved it, so that's awesome. The next book on my list I don't actually have, and that's because I literally just lent it to a friend, but I really enjoyed it. It's kind of on the same level for me as Red Rising. Like, they're kind of, I loved both of them, but both of them, like, I can see the issues that they have, and most of my issues for both of them are a lot of like the pacing issues and some like writing things, but that is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I also have a review for Nevernight on my channel, so I will link, and cards, and you know. So Nevernight basically follows Mia Corvier, who wants to become an assassin. So it's basically a story about her training and her trying to become a full-fledged blade to get vengeance on the people that have wronged her. I really enjoyed this book. Again, the writing in it was not... It was hard at first to get into because Jay Kristoff's writing in the series is very stylized, so it took a lot of getting used to, and I do think that the first couple chapters could have benefited from a little bit of editing as far as the actual writing of it goes, because it was very hard to dive into that world. But speaking of the world, it is one of the most interesting worlds that I've ever read in a fantasy. I adored the world in Nevernight. I just thought it was so fascinating and well developed and had so many layers of richness. So for me, why Red Rising and Nevernight kind of rank on the same is because they both kind of had pacing issues, but Red Rising definitely won as far as the characters in Red Rising. Nevernight definitely won as far as the world building, but both of them were fantastic books, and I would recommend the two of them, even though they're very different. Yeah. The next one on my list is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and the one after that is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I loved these books. I think The Philosopher's Stone is definitely more simple, but it is a really good introduction to the world. The characters are fascinating, but oh my god, The Prisoner of Azkaban is a masterpiece. I loved this book. It's got such interesting development in characters, and this is really where I think J.K. Rowling has kind of found her footing, and the world has found its footing, and the characters have found their footings, and it dives into a lot of interesting themes and subject matter while keeping the pacing up, and I don't know, it takes advantage of the magic in the world to such a full extent. It just, I loved it. I loved it, and it's my favorite movie as well. Very good. So I cannot wait to read The Goblet of Fire again. I think that it's gonna be fantastic, because I think I liked it. I liked the movie. It's hard for me because I read the books when I was kind of watching the movies as well, so they kind of got blended a little bit in my head, but it's fine. We're rereading them. It's gonna be much clearer soon, and I cannot wait. So the next one on my list is the third best book of the year. We are getting to the top 3, and it is a sequel to one of the books that I already talked about, and that is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. It is the sequel to Nevernight, and it is such a good book. To me, this book was a huge step up from Nevernight. While Nevernight was really, really good, and I really enjoyed it, this book I absolutely loved. It was just such a joy to read. In the first book, it can be hard to get into because it is so stylized, but there is also 2 different time periods that we're following in Mia's life, and the same is said for this. In the first book, I felt like there was like the main story, and then there was kind of the additional story of Mia's past, which I felt kind of dragged and lagged sometimes, and I didn't feel like it necessarily needed to be there. I feel like there could have been more effective ways to get a sense of a lot of the things that were happening that could have been a little bit more engaging, because I didn't feel like it was taken full advantage of. But that being said, this one is outstanding. It has that element again of the present and the past, but it all takes place after the first book. There's like the present, and then there's the near past. So basically we're trying to figure out how Mia got to where she got at the start of the book while we're reading it. So, oh my god, it's just really, really well executed. Both of the storylines are so engaging and fascinating, and I think Mia's character is a lot more interesting and engaging in this book. We also get some really cool gladiator fights, which I'm always a fan of, and overall I just thought it was such a mind-blowing success of a book. Would definitely recommend it. But yeah, let's move on. The second best book of the year is another sequel of another book that I read this year and talked about, and that is Golden Sun. So this is the sequel to Red Rising, and oh my god, it's so good. This is one of the most perfect books I've ever read. In fact, it's the second most perfect book that I've ever read. Okay, maybe the third. I don't know. It's up there. It's so political and interesting and engaging. I feel like the characters in this one also just have so much more depth and breadth, and the world is so much bigger and more intense, and the politics are so much more interesting. I really could gush and gush about it. The only thing I think is like not perfect about this book is the pacing at the beginning of the book. Again, it's a little bit slow, and I think that's kind of the problem with a lot of Pierce Brown's books, is it takes a second to really dive into the world and get into the book. But besides that, I think it is just outstanding, and the ending of this book destroyed me the first time I read it and the second time I read it, and I think every time I read it, it will also continue to destroy me. So overall, I adore this book and adore the series, and I think this is the best of the 3, so it was such a pleasure rereading it. This book follows Darrow after he has really ingrained himself in the bigger world. So we get a lot of space, there's a lot of spaceships and battles, and it's so intense and political, and I loved it. But with that out of the way, let's just move on to the #1 book of the year, which has got to be the most perfect book I've ever read in my entire life. And if you are familiar with my channel and keep up with all my reviews, you'll already know what this is. But if you're new or don't watch all of my reviews, you should. But also, The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale is the most perfect book. If you haven't read it, read it. It is a fantasy novel that basically follows Annie, who is a princess. She was the crowned princess of her kingdom, meaning that she would one day become the queen, but unfortunately she's not very skilled at all things queenly, and after her father passes away, her mother basically decides to send her to a neighboring kingdom to basically marry her off to someone else, just so that they can have that alliance. And things go wrong. I'm gonna tell you right now, things go terribly wrong, but it has one of the best, most interesting protagonists I have ever read. She develops so much during the book, but it's this subtle development that you almost don't realize is happening until it's happened. The writing in this book is some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read. Like, Shannon Hale's writing is just spectacular. There is so many interesting side characters. The plot is really interesting. There's so many levels of conflict, personal conflict, exterior conflict, and overall, I just could not sing my praises enough for this book because it is spectacular. I also have a review for this book on my channel, so I'll do the links and whatever, but I would really highly recommend reading this book. Also, oh my god, the author of this book, Shannon Hale, who, like, by the way, I read this book when I was a child, and it was my favorite book growing up until about grade 8 when I read Blood Red Road, and that kind of took its place as my #1 favorite book just because of where I was at in my life. But I think this has usurped Blood Red Road and reclaimed its place in my heart as #1. But yeah, it is just outstanding. And so the author of this was the author of most of my favorite books as a child. She saw my review and she tweeted about it and shared it on Twitter, and I spoke to her on Twitter briefly in her the comments of the retweeted video, and it was, oh my god, it was the nicest thing ever. I cried. I was like, oh my god, Mom, Shannon Hale has seen my review of her book, and she was so nice, and she liked my review, and oh my god, so it was just a lot. Anyway, it was emotional. Shannon Hale is a goddess. The Goose Girl is fantastic, and I think everyone should read this book, so please do that, and let me know if you like it. And oh, because that's the other thing, so many of you have commented and tweeted at me and messaged me and all these things saying that you picked up the Goose Girl because of my review and that you loved it, and so that's been a super interesting, fun experience as well, getting to hear all of you guys be like, oh yeah, I'm so thankful I picked this book up because of your review, which is like one of the reasons why I enjoy reviewing. I mean, a lot of my kind of big popular videos are the negative ones because that's what y'all seem to like to click on, but which is fun, and I really like to look at books critically and think critically and have discussions about those things, but it's really nice reviewing a book positively and having so many of you be like, I picked this up because of you and it touched me, and I'm so grateful. So that's also been a fantastic experience. Really, everything surrounding this book has been a fantastic experience this year, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the books in this series. I've also picked up Book of 1,000 Days, which I've never read, so I'm very excited to read this one. And then for Christmas, my mom gave me Princess Academy, which was the other book that I read as a kid that I absolutely adored. So overall, I'm just really excited to dive back into the amazing worlds of Shannon Hale. But yeah, that was what I read in 2018, ranked for you from worst to best. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it is a little bit late in the month and everyone and their mom has already done this video, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to start my 2019 reading year. I have basically a goal of reading 19 books in 2019. I think that'll kind of be like my theme, because I accidentally read 18 books in 2018, I think. 2018 was a roller coaster of reading experiences. There was good, there was fantastic, there was awful, there was mediocre. We were all over the place, all over the map, but I'm excited for 2019 and for my 2019 reading year. I have a lot of books on my TBR already that I'm really excited to dive into. There's a lot of sequels and spin-off series. I've discovered some really amazing authors this year that I'd like to dive more in depth into the world of those, you know, those authors and what they've created. So overall, I'm very excited for what's to come. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. If you missed any of those reviews of the reviews that I mentioned in the books that I mentioned, I have a review playlist, but feel free to enjoy those. And I think that's all I have for you. Sorry if this video was a bit of a mess. Thank you, goodbye, good night, and I will see you next time.
Je suis dans la vie comme dans mes rêves, et quand je crève, je suis le cri de qui me croit ou qui me prie.